RBA is raising interest rates.
Mhm.
When they raise interest rates, what it actually does is, obviously tightens serviceability and stops certain people from buying. It's also putting pressure on our property market where the prices of property are falling, which is fascinating in itself, which is leading to less listings. We've also got the issue of that when we raise interest rates, developers don't have the ability to build profitably, so they don't. So there's less projects coming through and less new homes coming through, which just makes this squeeze even tighter, right? You can see there's this squeeze building where it's like, well, less listings, more people seeking rentals, harder to find a place. Like the whole property market is slowing down. The velocity of this property market and new buildings coming online slowing down. Then as a counter to that, we've got our government just like ramping up immigration hard. So more people coming in, creating this even bigger squeeze, which I thought there was a really interesting article as well that came out this week, just as a little like news within news, is that now China has opened things. They've asked all the people that were midway through degrees in Australia to return. They're not going to acknowledge any of the accreditation you've received unless you go back and complete it.
Yeah.
So there's no ability to stay. They're forcing many people to come back through, which is about 40,000 people.
Found that interesting. Yeah. So essentially, if you were Chinese and you'd move back to China and were doing online learning for an Australian university, China has said, we will not even recognize your degree if it was an online degree. And
Are you a bit sus on this, just as a side note? Does that seem like if you're China, like what's the incentive here?
I think, yeah, so this is, depends on how deep you want to go, but I feel like this is trying to support each other's economy. I think that China wants people to be over here because it opens up the borders and sort of supports trade and does all those kind of things without a huge impact on them. But then also, obviously, Australia wants it because it brings people back. It brings the money into the economy. The article was like, what, $39 billion a year of industry or something like that. Like it is a big industry.
The universities, like this is great news for the universities. Really
totally.
good news.
And it's great news for property investors. But I found that interesting, but I can also understand it, right? Because China doesn't want all these people sitting in China learning. They want them to immerse themselves in the Western society. They want to be there and actually bring the money back as opposed to trying to just live off the economy there. And I actually think this is a good thing. I don't see this as a negative. I think this is a net positive for China, net positive for Australia. This is the right thing.
I completely agree. It's a great thing to have good relations with China. I'm for it. I love they're sending people here. I'm a fan of China. I really am. What I find interesting in this is, do you see so we're not building enough houses. People aren't listing. We're bringing people into the country. Like not good math. Math not makes sense.
Not good math.
Yeah,
totally.
You don't need to see the exact figures to go, hey, this doesn't lead to a good place.
The TPB leaning on itself. Yeah, I get you. So where do you think this lands?
I don't know if it's intentionally or unintentionally. This is the thing I look at it. But when a government introduces policy like this, it appears to me as like they're intentionally supporting the economy. This is a very intentional play to make sure, or hopefully make sure, we don't end up in a recession.
Totally.
My challenge with it is that when you look at it, it might actually have the effect we don't want of it. It may actually cause more inflation. It may actually cause things to go in a direction we don't want because it's a form of stimulus. More people in the country is more people buying things. It's more food, it's more housing, it's more electricity. So inherent in immigration coming in, demand for things increases also. GDP goes up, or can and should in this environment. So what I wonder is that inherently through policy like this, are we actually extending the interest rate hike cycle? Are we stopping things from falling in a significant way where that'd be the thing that would signal the rate change in itself? We're kind of like, the snake eating its own tail type of scenario here.
It's an interesting concept because it's fascinating because those 40,000 Chinese students that are coming in, like we know who's going to pay their rent or buy them an apartment and stuff, right? Like it's cash coming in from overseas. And so I'm looking at this going, okay, well, to your GDP point, like this is not just the GDP from Australia exporting things and like servicing itself. This is how do we bring in cash from external parties into Australia to help the economy continue to boost. And then I feel like the only logical explanation to this is that they feel as though corporate Australia will just figure itself out. Builders will figure itself out, just build the things. It's almost like, well, if we just push the demand in, the supply will figure itself out, right? There will be an equilibrium that will, and so it's more of a cool, well, we just need to make sure that we have the demand. Rest of Australia, figure out the supply. And so it's like, well, we'll just keep filtering on the demand and then we'll just help you with the supply.
Very pro for property. It's a very big pro for property if it's all coming through. Because what do they say in student accommodation is Melbourne and Sydney predominantly is where that is funded and where the universities are. And then internal migration is that the other states kind of like once people come to Melbourne and Sydney, eventually they migrate to other places. If I could make a request though, if they could all stop buying Toyota Prados, that would be fantastic.
I want my car.
The weight on a Prado has been really, really challenging for me right now.
I got a question for you. Is this because of the volume of population increase? And Michael Yarney did a great tweet about this, which I thought was fantastic, around the rate of increase in population to the increase in dwelling approvals. Do you think that this is the hard run to high density living? Like, do you just see the Melbournes and Sydneys of the world just building high rises as quick as humanly possible now? Like, this is just because the people that are coming in are the ones that are completely supportive of a 2-bedroom apartment. And that is just Australia's response to it of how do you build one thing and accommodate 1,000 of them?
I actually know a few people that work in government. I do. And do you know the thing that I am most fascinated by? They're really smart.
Totally.
We often sit here and say, oh, look at government making these terrible decisions. What, how dumb are they? The people I know who work in government, smart, really smart. And one of the things that they know and we know is the ability to control a narrative.
Yep.
So I look at some of the things governments do, and let's say they want to get a policy across the line, is they'll actually do something before it to make the policy easy to get across the line.
Yep.
So, for example, you might see all these articles come out on we're destroying Australia's climate. And then when they want to get a green energy bill across the line, guess it's a bit easier, right? Because everyone's worried about the environment.
This is a solution to the problem. Yep.
Correct. So I look at this right now and I go, if you wanted to get the population of Australia behind the idea of building more high rises and doing more apartment living and getting high density approvals over the line, what would you do?
This is the exact thing that I would be doing. It's like, demand's through the roof and they all look like this. And you go,
have you started to see news articles at all coming through about, Australian government funding what do they call it? Cost-effective housing or low-income housing?
Totally. Yeah, 140,000 of the beats.
And how did you feel when that came up?
Personally, I'm like, this is great. I'm like, this is good for my portfolio and it's good for the people that are coming to Australia.
Well, I'm not as capitalist as you, clearly. I was like, this is really great for the people that can't afford a home because, housing's really expensive in Australia. I think it's great we're doing something to step in. And I'm like, hang on a second.
What's going on here? No, see, I'm just always skeptical. I'm like, okay, cool. They don't always just do things for other people. I'm like, what else is there? But I get you.
Have you seen the TV show on Netflix, House of Cards?
No, but I know of House of Cards. I've never watched it.
I'm convinced that the government is more like House of Cards than we realize. I think it's very strategic. I think it's very intentional. I think they release articles all the time. Like, do you remember when not too long ago the Greens were releasing rent freeze?
Yeah.
There's ads for that everywhere. Yeah. So there's an intentional leak. They put something out there, see how it sits, and then they'll make a decision whether they actually run on that policy or not.
Yeah, it's a test run.
They're very, very clever. So if you're in government right now and you want to see certain policies across the line, I can assure you they sit there stacking the deck going, how can we set up an environment so that we can get people on board for this? Where they're like, yeah, absolutely, more towers in Melbourne. Let's do this. We need to help the people. Where in other times they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, because they needed.
Now, I don't think that's conspiratorial. I think that's smart of government to do if they want certain things to do. If I was in government and there were certain things I wanted to get done, I would be strategic as well.
Totally. Ditto.
So that's what I think we're seeing the eyes of from here.
All right, fellow property investor. If you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, Click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.